Ever get that like pit in your stomach feeling, scrolling through the news?
Oh, yeah.
Things are just off.
Yeah,
The
totally.
America we grew up with, it feels like it's slipping away, you know.
Right.
Everywhere you turn, it's division, extremism,
Yeah.
whispers of another civil war, even.
Mm-hmm.
Are we just anxious?
Hmm?
Or is there something more to it?
Well, it's easy to write it off, I think, as just anxiety, especially with today's 24/7 news, you know?
Right.
But you're not alone. A recent poll actually found that a whopping 40% of Americans believe a civil war is somewhat likely within the next decade.
Wow. 40%.
Yeah.
That's a lot. It makes you think, for sure. It reminds me of conversations I've had with, friends, family, people who've always been like, things will work out. But lately, even they're expressing doubts. So is it anxiety? Or is there something more substantial behind this unease?
Right. Yeah, and that's where these insights from this NPR Three-Line episode really come in. They interviewed historians and intelligence experts, and one of them, Malcolm Nance, a retired intelligence officer, he actually argues that what we're seeing isn't a classic civil war, but an insurgency.
Well, hold on. Insurgency.
Yeah.
Different from a civil war. Explain that to me and to our listener like I'm 10 years old.
Okay, so imagine a group of people who believe the system is rigged against them, and so they're working to destabilize it from within. Think protests that escalate to violence, attempts to disrupt government functions, spreading disinformation, to sow chaos and distrust. That's more in line with what Nance sees happening, this rejectionist movement, I guess you could call it, aimed at undermining the government's legitimacy.
Okay, I'm starting to see the distinction. So it's not necessarily armies clashing on battlefields,
Yeah.
but this more insidious erosion of trust and stability.
Exactly. And another expert they interviewed, historian Anne Applebaum, she calls this a crisis of legitimacy.
Crisis of legitimacy.
Yeah. It's when a large portion of the population loses faith in the electoral process, in institutions, in the very idea that the government represents them.
And this crisis of legitimacy is something unique to our time.
I mean, it's definitely amplified by our current political climate, sure,
Yeah.
but it's not entirely new. Applebaum draws a parallel to the period after the Civil War, the first Reconstruction. Peniel Joseph, another historian on the panel, he pointed out that the Confederate States, they never truly accepted their defeat, which created this ongoing conflict and violence even after the war was over.
So are we seeing echoes of that today? Groups refusing to accept election results, pushing their own version of events, almost like a rewriting history to fit their narrative.
It's a chillingly accurate parallel. Joseph emphasizes that this crisis of legitimacy, it's deeply rooted in a struggle over the narrative of American history itself. Like, what does it mean to be American? What values do we prioritize? These are fundamental questions that we're grappling with, and how we answer them shapes our understanding of the nation's past, present, and future.
It's not just disagreements about tax policy or healthcare. It's about fundamentally different versions of what America is and should be. And that battle over the narrative it's playing out everywhere. In our schools, on social media, even at our dinner tables.
Precisely.
Wow.
And that's what makes this deep dive so crucial. We need to understand the historical context, the forces at play, and the potential consequences if we allow this crisis of legitimacy to fester.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the most potent weapons, I think, in this battle over narratives is what experts are calling information warfare.
Information warfare.
Yeah, it's not tanks and bombs, but the manipulation of information itself.
Okay, that sounds like something out of a spy novel. How did that actually work in the real world?
Well, think about the constant stream of news and opinions we're bombarded with every day, right? Information warfare uses that stream to influence what we believe, how we feel, even how we vote. It can involve spreading fabricated news stories, creating these fake social media accounts to push specific agendas, using algorithms to amplify divisive content.
So it's like creating an echo chamber where people are only exposed to information.
Yeah.
That confirms their existing biases.
That's one aspect of it, yeah. It's about exploiting our natural tendency, I think, to gravitate towards information. That aligns with our worldview, even if it's not accurate or complete.
Right.
And it's remarkably effective. Malcolm Nance, the intelligence expert we mentioned earlier, he's been tracking this for years. He saw the rise of, autocratic leaders globally alongside Trump's campaign, and noticed these similar tactics of scapegoating, demonizing opponents, creating this us versus them dynamic.
That is a bit unsettling. to realize how these tactics are being used to manipulate people's fears and anxieties. But why are autocrats so appealing in the first place? I mean, America's a democracy. We're supposed to value freedom and individual rights.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But Applebaum's research highlights something fascinating. The appeal of autocracy. It's not new, and it's not unique to America, especially during times of rapid change or uncertainty. There's a certain allure, I think, to the idea of a strong leader, someone who promises simple solutions, a return to a perceived golden age, a sense of unity and order amidst the chaos.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, people want to be led, but they also want to be fooled.
Exactly. And unfortunately, that desire for simplicity and stability can make people vulnerable to those who exploit it for their own gain.
So we've got this perfect storm brewing, crisis of legitimacy, information warfare, eroding trust,
Yeah.
and this seductive appeal of authoritarianism.
Yeah.
It's a lot to process, honestly. It can make you feel powerless. Like,
Yeah.
what can any of us actually do about it?
I hear you. It's easy to get overwhelmed, but that's exactly what those who seek to undermine democracy, that's what they want. They want us to feel hopeless
Right.
and disengage the experts we've been discussing. They offered some potential solutions, and they start with a shift in perspective.
Okay, I'm all ears. What kind of perspective shift are we talking about?
Well, it starts with understanding that even amidst these huge systemic problems, we still have agency. We still have the power to choose hope over fear, to engage in constructive dialogue, to reclaim a sense of shared humanity.
Yeah.
Peniel Joseph was particularly passionate about this. He called for a new national narrative, one that acknowledges both the positive and negative aspects of American history, one that emphasizes a love for your fellow citizen above all else.
That's a powerful idea. It's like choosing to see the good in people, even when we disagree. It's choosing to believe that we can find common ground, that we can build a better future together. But how do we actually put that into practice?
Well, Applebaum offers some very practical advice. She says, and I'm paraphrasing here, get involved. Don't just sit on the sidelines and complain. Volunteer, join a political party, run for local office. Small actions can have a big impact.
So it's about participating in democracy, not just observing it.
Precisely. It's about showing up, making your voice heard, and being part of the solution.
And I remember Malcolm Nance having a really powerful call to action, too. He said, decide what you love about America and fight to protect it.
That's it. It's about remembering what's at stake and being willing to stand up for those values. Democracy isn't a spectator sport. It requires active participation, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's challenging.
Okay, I'm feeling a little more empowered now, but I still have this nagging question. If information warfare is so pervasive, how do we know what to believe? How do we become more discerning consumers of information?
That's the million-dollar question, and one we'll continue to grapple with. But recognizing the problem is the first step. We need to be aware of the tactics being used, the biases at play, the ways in which our emotions can be manipulated.
So it's not just fact-checking everything we see. It's about being aware of the broader context, the motivations behind the information, the potential for manipulation.
Exactly. And that's where critical thinking skills come in. We need to be able to evaluate sources, identify bias, recognize logical fallacies, separate evidence-based arguments from emotional appeals.
That sounds like a tall order. Where do we even begin to develop those skills?
Well, there are a lot of great resources out there, from organizations dedicated to media literacy to online courses that teach critical thinking techniques. But one of the simplest things you can do is diversify your information diet.
Diversify, you mean like eating your vegetable?
Exactly. Don't just consume news and information from sources that reinforce your existing beliefs. Actively seek out alternative perspectives, even those you might disagree with. It helps you break out of those echo chambers and see the bigger picture.
So instead of just reading the same news sites and following the same pundits on social media, we should actively seek out opposing viewpoints.
Absolutely. It's about challenging your own assumptions, considering different interpretations of events, and forming your own informed opinions.
You know, this conversation is really making me think about the role we all play in shaping the narrative. It's not just about being passive consumers of information. It's about being active participants in the conversation.
That's a crucial point. We can't just sit back and expect others to solve these problems for us. We have to be willing to speak up, to challenge misinformation, to engage in respectful dialogue, even when it's difficult.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, all that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing.
Exactly. Silence is complicity. If we see something wrong, if we hear something that's false or misleading, we have a responsibility to speak out.
So maybe the takeaway here is that we all have a role to play in safeguarding democracy, whether it's running for local office or simply having honest conversations with friends and family
Yeah.
about the challenges we're facing.
I couldn't agree more. And one of the most encouraging things, I think, that came out of that NPR episode was Peniel Joseph's reminder that even in the darkest chapters of American history, there have always been people fighting for justice, for equality, for a more perfect union.
That gives me hope. It reminds me that change is possible, even when things seem bleak.
Exactly. And that legacy of resistance and resilience should inspire us to keep fighting for the kind of future we want to see.
Well, I don't know about you, listener, but I'm feeling a little more empowered after this deep dive. It's been a sobering look at the challenges facing our democracy, but it's also been a reminder of the power we have as individuals to make a difference.
I couldn't agree more. It's a call to action for all of us to become more informed, more engaged,
Yeah.
and more committed to building the kind of world we want to live in.
And on that note, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. We've talked a lot about the dangers of information warfare. But what about the flip side? What if we reframe information as a tool for positive change? What if we commit to using it to build bridges, to foster understanding, to create a more just and equitable society? That's something worth thinking about.
Absolutely. And remember, an informed citizenry is the bedrock of a healthy democracy. So keep learning, keep questioning, and keep fighting for the future you believe in.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.